This is the regular meeting of the City Council of the City of Cottonwood, Arizona, to be held October 5th, 2021 at 4 p.m. at the council chambers. Thanks for everyone, to everyone for letting us start a little bit early. We're going to attend National Night Out, which is going to be postponed for a week due to the weather, but we're still meeting early. So, all right, let's have our clerk please take the roll.
Councilmember Henry is absent. Councilmember Curott. Councilmember Matthews.
Here.
Councilmember Naren is here. Councilmember Wilden.
Here.
Vice Mayor House is absent. Councilmember Matthews. I said Matthews already, didn't I?
I thought I was already.
I'm sorry.
We'll count them twice since we're missing some others. So
I'm out of order here. I know. Mayor Linsky.
Here. All right. Very good. Please stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, next is a brief summary of current events by the mayor, city council, and/or city manager. The public body does not propose, discuss, deliberate, or take legal action on any matter brought up during the summary unless the specific matter is properly noticed for legal action. Council members, do we have anything to report? No? All right. Nor do I, Mr. Manager. What do you have?
Mr. Mayor, Council, couple updates. Due to the current weather forecast, Cottonwood Police Department has rescheduled the National Night Out event till next Tuesday, October 12th from 4:30 to 7 at the Cottonwoods Kids Park. This event is free and we invite the public to come out and join us. And we will not have a work session that night, so there won't be any council meeting next Tuesday night. Cottonwood Fire Department will host their open house on Friday, October 22nd from 5 to 7 p.m. at the fire station. Come tour the fire station, meet our firefighters and the fire chief. This will actually be our new fire chief's first open house, won't it be? Yeah, so you come out and meet our new fire chief, Chief Ron Sontman. Learn about fire safety and prevention. Enjoy food cooked by our local fire personnel. Hamburgers, I'm assuming, from the grill back there in the back. Very good. Bounce around in the doghouse, bounce house, and watch live fire demonstrations. Clearly, I missed a committee meeting. I'll have to get caught up on that one. The Historic Preservation Commission is pleased to announce that the Arizona State Historic Preservation Office awarded the City of Cottonwood the 2021 Governor's Heritage Preservation Honor Award for the renovation and preservation of the Cottonwood Community Clubhouse. This award will be presented at the 2021 Historic Preservation Conference in late October. And finally, the youth center will be used for this year's Toys for Tots program. The after-school program will be moved into the recreation center this Friday. We have spoken with the school transportation director, and they feel confident in altering the bus routes to drop students off near the recreation center and the library to accommodate our change in facilities. So several council members were asked to help house all the toys that they get for Toys for Tots, and we were able to make some adjustments. I want a special shout out to Jack Till, our Parks and Recreations manager, for making this happen.
Awesome. All right, very good. Thank you. Okay, let's move on then to call to the public. This portion of the agenda is set aside for the public to address the council regarding an item that is not listed on the agenda for discussion. However, the council cannot engage in discussion regarding any item that is not officially listed on the agenda for discussion and/or action. And comments are limited to a 3-minute time period. We have yellow forms in the back, folks. If anyone would like to address the council, please fill out a form and we'll call you up. We've had just one form submitted tonight from Ms. Lindsay Good, and so the floor is yours. You have your 3 minutes, ma'am. Thanks. Welcome to the meeting.
Thank you. All right. Good afternoon. My name is Lindsay Good, and I am a nurse within your community here with Cottonwood. Last month, Northern Arizona Healthcare revealed that they will be mandating the COVID vaccine for all of their employees. This means that any employee who is not fully vaccinated by December 31st will no longer be employed via resignation due to being unvaccinated. I am no longer an employee with Northern Arizona Healthcare. I left the ER in good standing after 7.5 years of service to the community in order to pursue hospice nursing and to start my own business. However, due to the fear of retaliation in the hostile work environment, current employees feel voiceless. They have asked me to be their voice as I stand with them to hold the line against the mandate which threatens their careers and way of life. In March of 2020, when we were completely clueless as to what COVID was, my fellow nurses, techs, and doctors donned used and dirty personal protective equipment, wore trash bags, raincoats, shower caps, and isolation gowns provided by our great community here. And we went to war. We were applauded and cheered as we went on and off shift. The community offered free goodies from their locally owned businesses, and we were the heroes. Today, only 18 months later, more than 800 employees stand to lose their position due to an ultimatum: get a shot or lose your job. These healthcare heroes likely saved a life or 2 or 5 or 10 throughout the pandemic and in their career. These heroes who daily answer the call to be lost in the service of others are now completely disposable. Northern Arizona Healthcare has made it clear that exemptions of any kind will be hard to obtain, and if an exemption is granted, the employee will be required to test twice weekly for COVID at their own expense, with no guarantee that they will be allowed to work within their specified field. Merriam-Webster defined discrimination as the practice of unfairly treating a person or group of persons differently from other people and groups of people. Northern Arizona Healthcare is clearly and openly discriminating against those who have exercised their right to bodily autonomy. Not only is bodily autonomy a human right, it is the foundational principle upon which other human rights are built. Tomorrow at 8 a.m. at the corner of Willard and 89A, a peaceful protest against Northern Arizona Healthcare's vaccine mandate will be underway. I would like to make it very clear that this is not an anti-vaccine protest whatsoever. It is a line drawn by those who have had their freedom threatened by the very organization that 18 months ago called them heroes. So in closing, I am asking that you as representatives and elected officials of this community stand with those heroes tomorrow, hold the line, and show corporations like Northern Arizona Healthcare that freedom is still worth fighting for. To paraphrase a quote by Edmund Burke, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Good. Is there anyone else in the audience tonight that would like to address the council? All right, we'll move on then to approval of the minutes of the work session of September 14th, 2021. And I'll go ahead and motion to approve those minutes.
Second.
Okay, Mayor made the motion, Councilmember Nairn seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, minutes are approved. And we go on then into the consent agenda. The following items are considered to be routine and non-controversial by the council and will be approved by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered in its normal sequence on the agenda. And this evening we have 6 items on the consent agenda. I'll read them out loud, and if there's an item that anyone would like to have pulled, just indicate so. Item 1 is purchase of critical spare parts for the city's 911 Zetron ACOM radio equipment through an Arizona state contract and authorization to use council contingency funds for the purchase. Item 2 is purchase of portable radios from Motorola Solutions for the Cottonwood Police Department. Item 3 is proposed agreement with the State Historic Preservation Office for matching pass-through grant to perform a historic resources survey and inventory for the Old Town residential and commercial residential areas. Item 4 is resolutions number 3112, 3113, appointing Vernon Reed and appointing Ronald Baird to the Cottonwood Airport Commission and establishing their terms of office. Item 5 is resolution number 3111, appointing a member to the Planning and Zoning Commission. And item 6 is purchase of an E1 ladder truck for the Cottonwood Fire Department. Is there an item that anyone would like to have pulled?
I'm not going to pull it, although I think it's a little underwhelming that a purchase such as our ladder truck, after all these years of discussions during budget time, is on our consent agenda. But I'm not going to pull it because I'm glad we're actually getting it. But I did just want to note that it is rather a momentous occasion for us to be approving that.
Agreed, and we're going to do some sort of a fantastic ribbon cutting, I'm sure, in that. Yeah. Yeah. All right, then I will go ahead and motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, Mayor made the motion. Councilmember Henry seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, consent agenda is approved. Let's have our clerk read resolutions number 3112, 3113 and 3111 by title only, please.
Resolution number 3112, a resolution of the Mayor and City Council of the City of Cottonwood, Arizona, appointing Vernon Reed, a member of the Cottonwood Airport Commission, and establishing his term of office. Resolution number 3113, a resolution of the Mayor and City Council of the City of Cottonwood, Arizona, appointing Ronald Baird, a member of the Cottonwood Airport Commission, and establishing his term of office. And City Attorney's pulling up 3111 for me.
Okay.
Since I didn't have that. What's the name on that one? Resolution number 3111, a resolution of the Mayor and City Council of the City of Cottonwood, Arizona, appointing Todd Shreve, a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and establishing his term of office. Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you. It's not often we move faster than the clerk.
Still looking for it.
All right, let's go to new business then. The following items are for council discussion, consideration, and possible legal action. We have 3 items tonight. First up is ordinance number 708, disbanding the city's Library Advisory Board and Parks and Recreation Commission. This is the first reading.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Today, bring forward the first reading of ordinance 708. I know it sounds kind of awkward to use the word disbanding of a board or commission. It's more of a reorganization of it, but we do have to remove it out of our code, and that's what this ordinance actually does. As you may recall, on August the 10th, the council directed staff to go ahead and move forward to this. This is something we've been working on and off for years, because we do have a library board that's been around for as long as I've been here, and that's really long. And a commission that's been around just as long, and both of them have done a lot of great projects. However, over the last few years, we have had issues with trying to get sufficient people to actually man those particular commissions and boards. Since then, as an example, the last 3 Parks and Rec Commission meetings we haven't made quorum. So it makes it a little bit difficult. However, these are not going to go away. We're going to use them as a type of work groups. Working on projects, and we'll be reporting not only to the public whenever we're working on projects, as well as council, bring forward items that we'll be working on. There's plenty of work that still needs to be done, especially in the Parks and Rec area. We've got the Riverfront Master Plan that still has to be put together, and we've got to get a lot of work done over there. We've got trail systems we're working on. So there's a lot of projects out there, and what we'll be doing is we've already talked to the Parks and Rec Commission, some of the members that are still remaining, and they're willing to continue to work on projects, but we'll use this to bring work groups together that are specifically interested in that particular topic. Take, for example, if we're working on trails, we want to bring people in that are involved, that like to get involved in the trails program. If we're working with the, say, soccer fields or some sort of a project over at Riverfront, we'll bring those groups together that are willing to work on those particular projects. And I think that makes it a lot better for us to be able to get people that are interested in the certain projects and that will move projects forward. Now, staff will be completely involved in both the library and the Parks and Rec work groups, because we want to make sure that whenever we have a task on their table to work on, we want to make sure that it moves forward and comes to fruition, comes to our council. So with that being said, this is the first reading of this particular ordinance. We'll have another one coming up shortly for approval.
All right. Council, any discussion on this item? I know we've workshopped it. We've talked over the years about it.
Just a quick question.
Sure.
How are they going to be selected, of the work groups?
We're looking to probably advertise more than anything else and try to get people into. We've got social media available to us. We've got the newspaper obviously available to us. And also, of course, we'll be seeking, take for example, if we're working on trails, we'll try to include areas such as the Park Service and other people that we already have. We have a lot of people that have been involved in different aspects of Parks and Rec or in library projects that we could go ahead and at least advertise, or if nothing else, go ahead and select them, send them letters, and try to get them involved.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Wilden, we also want to create a volunteer list where we would have names and email addresses and their areas of interest that we can reach out to. And as he was alluding to, there's a lot of our already nonprofit groups out there that already organize around different things. The Trails is a big example, and we can reach out to those actual organizations for some of those volunteer hours.
Thank you.
All right. Well, again, I know, like you said, Mr. Rodriguez, it's awkward to say disbanding. Reorganization, I think, is more appropriate here. We've got a tremendous amount of volunteers in our community that want to do good, but some are a little intimidated by the open meeting law and other such requirements, being a member of a commission, of a public body. So I think this is a great way to still harness the good talent we have here and get some great projects done. So.
Mayor and Council, I do want to go ahead and take my hat off to Steve and to Matt, who worked on trying to get this thing together, because it's a little bit more complex, and I guess Mary Ann was probably also involved. It was a little bit more complex than just putting something together and bringing it to council. There's going to be a lot more involved by trying to get it out of code.
Okay. All right, well, this is the first step to wrestle it out of the code. So first reading only. We'll bring it back here in a couple weeks for a final vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Let's have our clerk then read ordinance number 708 by title only.
Ordinance number 708, an ordinance of the Mayor and City Council of the City of Cottonwood, Yavapai County, Arizona, amending the city's municipal code by replacing Chapter 2.52, Library, and deleting Chapter 2.68, Parks and Recreation Commission. Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. All right, second item is extension and expansion of contract for supplemental IT services with Cloud IT.
Hi, Mayor, council members. I'm John Carter, the Information Technology Director. So the item before you tonight is an extension of an existing agreement with our IT vendor, Cloud IT. They provide a lot of our IT services, analysis, management of our systems and such. Excuse me. So we performed a competitive quote process in 2019 for the fiscal year 2020. We had 4 vendors show up, Cloud IT, which is based here in Cottonwood, Copper State / Blackpoint, which is based in Flagstaff, and SnapTech and Enterprise Technology Services, both based in Phoenix. So what we did is we've got 4 quotes. We deemed Cloud IT to be the most advantageous because of their hourly rate and the lack of travel charges. Since they're here in town, they could react much quicker as well. That initial year, we did it for 10 hours per month. That ended up being ended up being about $17,400 on that budget year. Then for FY 2021, we sole sourced with them as well because they already had great knowledge of our systems and we were working well together. And we did it for 20 hours that month because we kept increasing as we needed more and more help. That ended up being about $34,800 last year. Since it was under the $50,000 limit, that's why it never came to council in a meeting. This year, as we're happy with their services and we would like to sole source again, this year we needed to increase it to 40 hours per month, and that's going to push it over the $50,000 limit. That's why we're here tonight. We're asking for the $72,000 plus any applicable taxes to be approved today. So we needed to increase from 10 to 20 to 40 hours over the 3 years because we've had greater issues. We've had more complexity with our systems. We've obviously moved to the cloud with things like email as we did last year. And this is all pushed it past some knowledge that we have, and we're trying to fill in all those knowledge gaps that I've talked about in previous meetings. These hours are used for everything from bigger projects. They're used for system analysis, monitoring, and down to everyday break-fix type stuff. Now these hours are month to month and they roll over if we don't use them. So we really look at it, even though it's 40 hours per month, it's 480 hours a year, and we look at that as one block. So if we need 10 in January, but we need 50 in February, then we use them that way, like rollover minutes for your cell plan, so to speak. And for this, we do get a team of experts. They have five locations in 5 cities. They have a lot of experts that we couldn't hope to hire here. And we get all of that for less than a full-time person here as a systems administrator, if you consider pay and benefits, of course. So going forward, how do we plan to deal with this? We plan to do a sealed, a formal RFP process so that we can do a 3-year contract going forward and not have to come back every year to ask for the same thing. And with that, I'll ask for any questions you have.
All right, do we have any questions, Council, for Mr. Carter?
So is the reason for the sole source they know our configuration?
Yes, so we did that competitive process 3 years ago, but we didn't do a formal RFP, so we have to sole source each year if we want to continue using the same vendor. And yes, they have specific knowledge of our systems. As you probably all remember, during our email failure last year, they came to our aid as well. And it serves, it's so much more expedient to use someone who already knows your systems. And they've helped us actually beef up our systems as well because of their great knowledge and expertise.
And I would just have a question for our city attorney, Mayor. I'm not sure if, does that pass procurement sole source muster just to say they know our configurement where it's something that seems as though it could be readily discoverable to a new IT company?
Mr. Mayor, Ms. Henry, it does if the council says it does. Under the procurement rules council has adopted, you can make that determination.
Okay, well, our determination in this case, do you think it'll pass muster if we have an audit?
I do.
It doesn't appear that the price has gone up that much over the last few years. Are we locking in this price for 3 years?
No, this is year by year. It has been $145 an hour. This year it's $150 an hour.
One question. Sure. So you mentioned they were local, being Cottonwood,
Yes.
but they have a Phoenix address?
Yes, their head office, if you will, is in Phoenix. They're the only one of the 4 vendors that had a location local to us, which has helped with the speed of their service as well.
So then I understand we'll use this contract for 1 more year, and then we're going to go out for a 3-year contract.
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, Council, a little bit more in the background also. During the budget process, a systems network person was asked for in IT.
Systems administrator.
Thank you, systems administrator. And this was my compromise with him, let him go up to the 40 hours per week or per month to see if if that was enough. Because this, if there were to be another increase above 40 hours a month with this cost, then we have to look at, is it more efficient to hire someone in-house? But with the IT person at this level with benefits, it would be more than this. So this is him and I coming to an agreement. I think we came to an agreement on this, an understanding. We came to an understanding on this for 1 more year before we went into a long-term contract in addition.
Okay. All right. Very good. Then I would entertain a motion.
If I get back to it.
Okay.
Okay. I move to waive the city's procurement policy and approve the expansion of the agreement, for IT support services with Cloud IT for a period not to exceed 12 months at a cost of $6,000 per month plus applicable taxes.
Second.
All right. Councilmember Matthews made the motion. Councilmember Wilden seconded it. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Henry?
Yes.
Councilmember Cura?
Yes.
Councilmember Matthews?
Yes.
Councilmember Naren?
Yes.
Councilmember Wilden?
Yes.
Mayor Linsky?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, next and last is authorizing the mayor to send a letter to the Yavapai County Board of Supervisors urging the board not to adopt the additional subdivision requirements of A.R.S. 11-823.A related to water adequacy.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I'm Tom Whitmer. I'm the Natural Resources and Utilities Director for the city. As most of you are aware, the County Board of Supervisors is currently considering adopting the provisions of State Statute 11.823, which would require all subdivisions throughout the county, regardless of whether they're inside the city or outside the city, to demonstrate an adequate water supply for 100 years in order for each lot in that subdivision to be developed. My purpose in coming to you tonight is to request your approval for a letter that would oppose the county adopting that provision at this point in time. In order to understand why we're recommending, or why staff is recommending that, I think it's important to first and foremost understand what adequate water supply is, kind of get a historical background on water adequacy throughout the state, how we got to where we are to this day, kind of go over some of the potential impacts and what we've learned from what has transpired up to this point in time, and then kind of touch base on what has been accomplished with regards to managing water resources throughout rural Arizona without these types of regulations, and then conclude by just kind of summing things up, if you don't mind. To understand what adequate water supply is in the state of Arizona, it's defined in statute. And basically, if you're a developer, private water company, city, or a town, and you've got a proposed subdivision that's being built, you have to demonstrate that there's sufficient groundwater, surface water, or effluent of adequate quality that will be continuously, legally, and I emphasize legally in this case, and physically available to satisfy the water needs of that subdivision for 100 years. The developer, city, or town also has to demonstrate that they have the financial capability to put the infrastructure needed in order to deliver that water to that subdivision. So where did we get this? How did it come into play with regards to state statute? Well, in 1973, for those of you who may have been around in the state back in the 60s and 70s, there were a lot of land scams that were underway throughout the state. The legislature, in its infinite wisdom, decided that they would adopt some legislation. So in 1973, they adopted the Mandatory Water Adequacy legislation. What that piece of legislation was intended for at that point in time was more of a buyer's beware type of legislation. In other words, if you were a developer and you wanted to build a subdivision anywhere in the state at that point in time, you had to go to the Department of Water Resources or its predecessor, because the Department of Water Resources didn't come around until 1980, and you had to demonstrate that you had an adequate water supply prior to building it. Now, there was no enforcement, though, so if you couldn't demonstrate or didn't want to demonstrate, you could just request an inadequate water supply demonstration from the department, and they would issue it to you. There was a caveat, though. There was a provision in statute, and still is, that says that if a subdivision has been determined to have an inadequate water supply, it must, for the first buyer of each lot within that subdivision, they have to notify them that the Department of Water Resources has determined that they have an inadequate water supply. Now, it may not be actually an inadequate water supply there, but it's a very inexpensive and less time-consuming proposition for them to just go ahead and mark the box that says, give me an inadequate water supply. So that's kind of the foundation upon how water adequacy began in the state here. Without that mandatory provision, though, many developers actually went out and started to just say, give me the inadequate water supply, because it saved time and it was definitely less costly. Now, you've heard the provisions of assured water supply, inadequate water supply, so I threw this slide in there just so you would know the difference between the two, because there is a big difference between the two. In 1980, we passed the Groundwater Management Act. That created active management areas within the state that were areas that were defined to have some critical groundwater issues, meaning they were pumping a whole lot more water out than was going in either artificially or naturally. Along with passing the Groundwater Management Act, it created what was called the Assured Water Supply Requirements. That was only subject to subdivisions within active management areas. Outside the active management areas, we still have the adequate water supply provisions in statute that developers must follow. Inside, however, they have enforcement. So if you're inside an active management area and you're proposing to build a subdivision, you have to demonstrate that there is an adequate water supply for 100 years, or you can't get the subdivision platted for sale. That's the big difference between adequacy and assured. In 2006, actually shortly before 2006, rural Arizona kind of got their act together, working with the Department of Water Resources, trying to identify some solutions to issues that rural Arizona was having. As a result of that, the Department of Water Resources formed what was known as the Statewide Water Advisory Group. It consisted of 54 representatives from around the state. They were stakeholders from both rural Arizona as well as in the metropolitan area. The primary objectives were threefold. First was, it was to assess the growth and water supply issues facing Arizona with an emphasis on rural Arizona. It also provided a forum for rural Arizona to kind of present their issues of concerns to the metropolitan Phoenix areas to request assistance and help. And then ultimately, it was to develop solutions and recommendations to go forward with it. The two primary issues that were identified from the SWAG process were, first and foremost, there was a need for funding, a source of funding to provide loans and grants for water development and new water supplies and infrastructure in rural Arizona. The second thing that came out of SWAG was that they really, really wanted to ensure that local control over water management was secured just to them. They didn't want the state coming down and mandating, oh, you're going to do this, you have to do this. They didn't want, the state coming in and creating a bunch of active management areas all over the state. Everybody kind of bought into those two issues that came out of it. However, the metropolitan Phoenix and Tucson areas were concerned that since the lion's share of the tax base that goes into the general fund that would fund this ultimately was coming out of the metropolitan areas, they didn't want to create a fund that could just be used without some sort of checks and balances on that money. In other words, they wanted regulatory restrictions as a caveat in order to access those funds. So in 2007, two pieces of legislation were enacted to address the issues that were identified in the SWAG process. The first was House Bill 2692, which created the fund, but it also had a condition in that piece of legislation that said that the only people that would be available to access that fund were those that had adopted the mandatory adequate water supply requirement. Second piece was Senate Bill 1575, which created 11823, which gave counties the ability to, by unanimous vote, adopt a mandatory adequate water supply provision for all subdivisions throughout the county. Once adopted by a county, it could not be removed, though. There were no provisions for it to be taken out once they'd adopted it. You're in, and you're in for the life of it. To date, it's important to understand that the Water Supply Development Fund has yet to be funded. So the carrot and stick approach kind of didn't come to fruition. There was the stick, but no carrot. After that enactment of those two pieces of legislation, two counties actually adopted it. The first was Cochise County. And there were two reasons that were the drivers behind them adopting it. The first was the base realignment and closure process, better known as the BRAC process, was underway where they were considering whether or not to reauthorize Fort Huachuca. The primary issues that were brought up to the commission were water issues. They were concerned that future pumping might potentially impact the San Pedro River as well as the San Pedro Riparian National Conservation Area. The second was that Sierra Vista, Fort Huachuca, the Nature Conservancy, Cochise County, and others who were working in partnership down there had identified a number of water development projects to address their water issues. And they felt by adopting this, they could access money from the Water Development Fund. So those were the two big drivers. Now, prior to them adopting it, they had multiple meetings with the Department of Water Resources, and the Department of Water Resources had pretty much given them the indication based upon the hydrology within that area that under current definitions of what it takes to get an adequate water supply determination, most developers should have no problems whatsoever other than the cost and time associated with obtaining that. Yuma County also adopted it. Now, Yuma County is a different animal altogether because the lion's share of development in Yuma County is along the Colorado River. So their water source is primarily Colorado River. So they weren't really that concerned so much with obtaining adequate water supplies on groundwater, but they felt by obtaining it, they could get access to those monies as well. And like I said before, there is no money. So what do we learn, or what do we know about the mandatory adequacy requirements that they're considering adopting right now? First of all, the mandatory adequate water supply requirement for all subdivisions is not a management tool. It's strictly a regulatory stipulation that is not necessarily based on the physical availability of water. And perhaps the best example I can give you is if you go up to Flagstaff, Williams, Munns Park, their groundwater, you won't reach groundwater, I should say, until you're below about 1,500 foot depth to water. The current definition of an adequate water supply based on groundwater is that you must demonstrate that over the course of 100 years, the projected demand for that subdivision will not cause the groundwater table to decline below 1,200 feet below land surface. So they already are out of the question. They cannot get an adequate water supply for any subdivision in those areas. In Yavapai County, areas around Ash Fork and Seligman have the same kind of situation where the depth of groundwater is, it's a little shallower, it's around 1,200, but still trying to get an adequate water supply determination in those areas is impossible. The second thing that we know is that it does attempt to ensure that all subdivisions will have an adequate water supply, in which we all agree that that is important. You don't want people putting subdivisions and developments out there without having some source of water. But this piece of legislation doesn't guarantee that. As I said before, if you go up on the Coconino Plateau, you couldn't get an adequate water supply, but yet the Coconino Aquifer and the Redwall Moab up there are significantly large in size, and there's a lot of water up there for them. They just can't get it until they drill very deep wells. For example, Williams Well right now, the Dogtown 2 well is 3,750 feet deep, just to give you an idea. And they didn't hit water till they're at 2,500. So the third thing it is, it does make cities and towns and counties eligible to obtain money from the Water Development Fund. But as I said before, to date, it has not been funded sufficiently to access any money from that. So what have we learned from this since the legislation went into place in 2007? We've learned that the one-size-fits-all metric for demonstrating adequate water supply doesn't work for the state or the county. You look at the hydrogeology in the Wickenburg area, it's vastly different than what's in the Prescott AMA area, what's in the Verde Valley, or what's to the north of us up in Seligman and Ash Fork. It's vastly different. And to say we got one metric, which is based upon a depth of water criteria, just doesn't work. Also, what we've learned is that whenever you create obstacles for developers to obtain or to be able to develop lands, they're going to find a way around it. And in this case, as it happened in Cochise County, they went into lot splits. You know, subdivision, a legal subdivision is 6 or more splits. So they'll take a piece of property, split it 5 ways, and then take each one of those, split it 5 ways, take each of those, split it 5 ways to get to the same end game. And what we found when you start looking at wildcat subdivisions, dry lot subdivisions and such, their ability to manage water resources is not that efficient. All one has to do is look out to the Verde villages to see how well the management of the water resources are. So what is currently underway and what are we expecting in the future to occur that could really have some serious effects on the adoption of a mandatory adequacy requirement? The adjudication. As all of you, I believe, are aware now, the special master in the adjudication recently issued a decision where she came out and classified all wells located within the magical subflow zone as pumping surface water. None of those wells have a legal right to be pumping surface water because they don't have a water right. So now you've got thousands of wells here just in the Verde Valley that, if her decision holds up, will be illegally pumping water. What that does for those wells outside of it, it sets a precedent, because the ongoing efforts down the San Pedro, which is where the beta test site is for all adjudication, they've come out and they've said if you have a well outside the subflow zone, that cone of depression overlaps into the subflow zone, that well also is deemed to be pumping at least a portion of surface water, which is critical to understand, because if you look at, we've got 23 active wells here in the city. We actually have more than that, 23 that are actually included in the system itself. And out of those 23 wells, all of them will eventually be pulled into the adjudication and deemed to be pumping at least some portion of surface water, more than likely. What that does for us, we have a designation right now of adequate water supply for 6,000 acre-feet a year. Back in 2007, 8, and 9, we applied for a determination of adequate water supply to become a designated provider, and we're able to get that after 3 years and roughly $300,000 or more. It took us to get that determination. That is now in jeopardy with this decision. Because if you recall from the very first slide where one of the provisions is they have to demonstrate they have the legal availability to that water, if that water is now surface water, none of us have a water right for that water. ADWR could withdraw our designation. Now we've got a designation for 6,000 acre feet, like I said, and as we're currently pumping just under 3,000 acre feet a year. All developments that have been coming in or proposed to be coming in have been able to slide underneath our umbrella because their demands will not cause us to exceed that 6,000 acre feet per year that we currently have. So it prevents them from having to go out, hire a hydrologist and a consulting firm to go and develop a groundwater flow model, present it to the Department of Water Resources, and go back and forth till they get an approval in order to get their certificate of adequate water supply from the Department of Water Resources. They can just fall underneath our umbrella as a result of us having this. This also is going to have some serious effects on any subdivision in the future attempting to get an adequate water supply determination, simply because if they're looking at either drilling a new well or using an existing well, they're going to have to demonstrate that it's only pumping groundwater. And as I said before, if you look at what has been going on in the San Pedro, virtually all wells will be pulled into it based upon modeling that they're doing right now as we speak. That basically will put all subdivision or developments that are founded upon subdivisions in jeopardy of ever going down that path. So we look at this as a regulatory requirement and you say, well, what's our options? Back in 2006, when SWAG was started, and what I said before, one of the things, or one of the purposes, was to allow rural Arizona to inform the metropolitan cities, Phoenix and Tucson most notably, of what was going on in rural Arizona. In their minds, they felt that no water management was underway except for what they were doing because they were active management areas. Well, it was a real eye-opener to them when you had towns like, or cities like Cottonwood, towns like Payson, Flagstaff, Sierra Vista, come in and start talking about what they were doing without having these requirements. As an example, Cottonwood's pumping almost 20% less water today than it was 20 years ago. That's huge if you think about it, because our population has increased significantly. Cottonwood's total gallons per capita per daily use today is, well, I should say was 170 total gallons per capita per daily use back in 2000. Today it's sitting around 87, 88 is where it's at. That's unbelievable. We were one of the lowest municipalities in the entire state. Cottonwood's residential GPCD is around 65. If you look at what we're doing in recharge, next year we'll be recharging 300 acre feet a year back into the aquifer. Clarkdale's total GPCD has gone from about 130 in 2006 to around 90 today. Sedona, which isn't even a water provider, is recharging about 220 acre feet per year back into the aquifer system itself. Town of Payson's total GPCD is around 88. It's right where we're at. Their residential is sitting around 60. Flagstaff is sitting at 100 total, and their residential is 57, which is the lowest that I'm aware of for a municipality in the state of Arizona. And we've done all this without, regulatory requirements like 11.823. So in conclusion, the mandatory adequacy water requirements for subdivision is not a management tool. The one-size-fits-all approach, as I hopefully explained fairly well, doesn't work for the county. Until such time as there's greater clarity and direction from the adjudication, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to go ahead and adopt this, and it just adds greater uncertainty to the future of development throughout the entire county by doing this. And lastly, the only potential benefit to the county is access to the Water Development Fund if it is ever funded. In closing, I would just say, we've attached a letter to your packet, basically encouraging the county at this time to not adopt the provisions of State Statute 11.823. And with that, I'll gladly address any questions you might have.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Whitmer. That's a very thorough explanation. Just one question. Do we know what the impetus is from Yavapai County to adopt the provisions of that statute?
You know, it's really not clear. We've heard a couple of things. One was we heard from Supervisor Brown that he's getting daily calls from folks that have just recently moved in here saying you need to do more with water management. We've also heard that statements secondhand that there's the possibility that, you know, Supervisor Brown feels it's not exactly on the up and up to have, you know, the Prescott AMA under one set of rules and the rest of the county under another set of rules. What it really is, I couldn't tell you. It's more speculation than anything else.
Okay. All right, Council, do we have any questions for Mr. Whitmer?
What communities are in favor of this, if any?
Outside of Cochise County, and none. None that I'm aware of, let's put it that way.
I do have a quick question. I'll bring it up right after this, but I watched the meeting, the planning and zoning meeting when they were discussing this, the one you were at. And it does seem like this is just kind of a Band-Aid for politicians to say, look, I'm doing something, but yet it's not the right thing to do. And a lot of times it'd be better to do nothing than to do something that's useless or even damaging. So I agree. The one thing that really stood out on this meeting is that if they go ahead and do this, the wildcat subdivisions, what they're going to do is, push people out to split a bunch of land out there outside of this and drill wells on while they're still allowed to do that. And no control. Drilling wells, septic tanks, no water management whatsoever. So it actually does seem and has done some harm in some areas and kind of had the opposite effect. So I'm completely for asking them not to pass this. My only question was, it's interesting, so we're getting ready to inject about 1/10 of what we use back into the aquifer. What are our future plans for water injection? And what are we hoping to get to in the at least near future?
That's a good question. We've kind of changed directions to some degree or not, or another. In other words, we originally had, and we are permitted now to do 3 injection wells, where each one could inject up to 300 acre feet per year. So you're looking at a total of about 900 acre feet of water that we could potentially inject on an annual basis and receive credits for. It's very good. As some of you are aware, we're also looking at direct potable reuse, and which is the means by which you treat water to potable standards and put it right back into the drinking water system. Right now, we're producing about a little over 1,000 acre feet a year in effluent. So if we were to go do all injection, there'd be no water available for direct potable reuse, which is a very important resource for the city. In fact, it's the only resource that the city has complete control of. And it's the only resource that actually increases with population. We're looking at it very closely. We are permitted to do those 2 other ones. I mean, we'll still have to jump through a bunch of hoops and hurdles in order to demonstrate successfully to the Department of Water Resources that injecting in these other locations will not result in water flowing into the river and then flowing out of the basin, which they won't give us credits for. That was perhaps the biggest change in policy at the Department of Water Resources. Previously, when we first introduced injection and were pursuing it, their policies were, if you just put it back in the ground, we're going to give you credits for it. They changed that midstream and said, no, you need to demonstrate that it will not intersect with the river and flow out in order to obtain credits. So that kind of changed the game midstream. And we had to go back and start looking at injection wells as far away from the river as possible. Because one of the other sites, which is at Kids Park, we'd already drilled that well, tested it, and we're ready to start looking at constructing the facilities to get it up there. And that's when the department came back and says, we won't allow you to obtain credits from injecting in that well. So we'll look at putting that well back into the system eventually and use it as a for more redundancy.
Okay, thank you. It looks like direct to potables.
Yeah. If I may, just so you're aware also, and I left this out, Cochise County, to this day, would like to be out of this. There actually was legislation run in 2017 and 2018 unsuccessfully that attempted to allow counties that had adopted it to reevaluate and decide whether they wanted to stay in it or not. Simply because shortly after they adopted it, there was a massive master plan community that was underway down there, already had their determination of adequate water supply. A lawsuit was filed by the Center for Biological Diversity, the Bureau of Land Management, and one other person that was challenging Arizona Department of Water Resources' ability to actually issue adequate water supplies without taking into consideration Federal Reserve rights. That went on for 3 years until 2018, when the Arizona Supreme Court finally ruled in favor of the Department of Water Resources, saying that you can only do what's granted in statute, and in statute it said, here are the definition of what it takes. So, but for those 3 years, all development was put on hold, whether they had a determination yet or not. It almost put the developer out of business, in fact, of that big community. And the interesting thing about it, they had put into place some mitigation efforts that if the development had been built, it actually benefited the river more so by them being there, because recharge was set up to take place right on the banks of the river.
All right. Any other questions for Mr. Whitmer on this? Well, Mr. Corbin and I were aware of this early on. We did email Supervisor Brown to ask him to hold off on this. We have talked to the other supervisors that represent us, or at least the Valley. They haven't said whether or not they support it, but they've definitely listened at least.
Mr. Mayor, if I can add, we just yesterday met with Supervisor Gregory James, and he came right out and said he's currently not supportive of it. I think he's listening to all sides, and so we'll see when it comes in front. There's another P&Z educational meeting that I think Tom and some other folks are speaking at later this month. And then I think the Board of Supervisors will consider it, or at least work through it a little bit. Our Supervisor Michaels, doesn't seem like she's supportive of it either. So I'm hoping that they stand with us. I did ask Supervisor James yesterday if he still wanted this letter, if that was helpful, and he thought it was. Remember, it only takes one of them to vote no to kill it, and that's our hope. I hope you guys caught the math difference when Tom was talking about if we use about 3,000 acre-feet a year and we only can inject, or we only get back about 1,000, that means we're missing about 2,000. I don't know the whole story, but that's a lot of Verde villages where we don't get to recapture our water and reuse it. So it's another side effect of not having a sewer system in these places, in these wildcat subdivisions and places like that. Recapturing the water so we can either inject it, reuse it, or bring it up to higher standards is just so important to conserving water that this does not stop growth. It doesn't reduce the amount of water coming out of the ground. And in my layman's opinion, it actually increases the amount of water not getting recharged, not getting reused, not being disposed of wisely.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, in reference to what he's saying, inside the city, we capture almost 80% of what we deliver to a home. Outside, zero.
Right. Right. All right. Council, will you let me sign the letter?
Yes, I'm definitely in favor of that.
Okay.
And I don't have any questions for Mr. Whitmer, but I just want to thank you for a very thorough, well-thought analysis and presentation tonight to really help show to the public something that I think could be lost with less explanation, and that is, I believe the rest, I can't speak for council, but I personally am in favor of developments that have appropriate plans in place for the use of water, and that there is adequate water planned long-term for developments. But this piece of legislation does not accomplish that, and I am especially concerned about the lack of ability to leave. So if you get in, and it's not working for your particular county, you're stuck. And that just seems onerous and like a bad decision. My concern with the letter tonight, and I do support you sending it, Mayor, but I don't want the concerned folks in our community to think that that's enough. So I would urge folks who think that this is a bad idea and those that this will impact directly to reach out to your county supervisors and let them know how you feel, because I know personally if this were to pass, we're going to hear about it, but yet there's not much that we can do except for encouraging folks to express their opinion to their county supervisors. Thanks.
Thank you for that. We do have a weekly meeting too with the other mayors in the area in the valley, and this has come up for sure, so we'll see what the other communities do. Yeah. All right.
Do you need a motion on it?
Yes, I believe so. Yes, please.
Try not to miss this one. I move to authorize the mayor to send a letter to the County Board of Supervisors urging the board not to adopt the additional subdivision requirements set forth in Arizona Revised Statute 11-823A.
Second.
All right, Councilmember Matthews made the motion. Councilmember Karat seconded it. Let's have a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Henry?
Yes.
Councilmember Currat? Yes. Councilmember Matthews?
Yes.
Councilmember Naren?
Yes.
Councilmember Wilden?
Yes.
Mayor Linsky?
Yes.
Motion carried.
All right, thank you. I move we pay the claims and adjustments.
Second.
All right, Mayor made the motion. Councilmember Henry seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I would motion to adjourn.
Second?
All right, Mayor made the motion. Councilmember Matthews seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thanks, Council.